That's right. I want a tournament. I'm not just a pretty face. If I'm even a pretty face. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek video. I am Phil, the Glacial Geek, and today I'm here to talk to you about my experiences last weekend going to an RTT down here in Cerberus Legion Games in Richmond Hill, Georgia. It's basically all the same area here, Savannah, Pooler, all of it, just kind of the same thing, but different areas technically. So it was in Richmond Hill. It's a newer store, and they've been putting on some RTTs, which have been fun, and they have pretty decent turnout. It was, I think, about a 12-man tournament, so it wasn't huge, but that's the space of the store that they have available there, which was fun to be able to play it in. But I was going into it, I'm going to be taking my Creations of Bile, because right now that is my competitive army, and that's what I want to keep building on and working with. And as you've seen, it's been a lot of fun for me to be able to use them and play with them and be able to achieve some things like I did at Kansas City. And I came to the realization, after I've been looking through, what the army had to do and looking at my list and wanting to tweak some things, that I, much like a lot of chaos here, had put in Abaddon because he is a beatstick. He is great. He is a really awesome model. He's pointed very, very well for what he does, and he does a lot of really awesome things. And I had him in my list because it was kind of this the mindset that if you're going to be doing a Chaos Space Marine list and you're leaving out Abaddon, you're leaving the best player on the sidelines. You're leaving him on the bench, and why do that when you don't have to? And that was a fair call. But the more I've been playing, the more I've been using him in tournaments and in any kind of game that I'm doing with a competitive system, with the secondaries that we have, I came to the realization that a lot of times Abaddon ends up being kind of a hindrance for my list. He's not really a hindrance. He's really good at what he does. But what he does well is kill things. And he kills them in close combat, and he slaughters things left and right, killing a lot of models, allowing you to get the points however you do. However, with the Creations of Bile, a lot of what my points are coming from my Creations of Bile units killing other units in close combat. And I do a lot of close combat. That's what the army does. That's what the list does. That's what the design of the Creations of Bile for me is all about, is enhancing close combat as much as possible. But our secondary, Specimens for the Spider, specifies that it has to be a Creations of Bile unit killing something in close combat to get the points. So you get points for killing characters, you get points for killing things other than characters and monsters, but it's only if it's a Creations of Bile unit. So in a lot of matchups, I have Abaddon there as a deterrent, and that's 300 points of deterrent to not go places, to sit on objectives. And I know he's hard to kill, so he's very good at holding. He will hold an objective if he's on it. But at the end of the day, that's 300 points that I can't really utilize fully, because if he's killing things, that's taken away from the opportunity of my Creations of Bile units from killing things. And if I have 300 points that I can't really utilize in a lot of matchups, then what is he doing for me? And there are certain matchups that he shines. Like if I go up against Knights, I'm not taking Specimens of the Spider, and I'm doing Bring It Down, and I'm killing vehicles, at which case Abaddon is very good at that. You can go in there and slice up Knights left and right, getting me points. So in matchups like for Knights or armor-heavy Imperial Guard, a lot of that, Abaddon would flourish. He would shine. He would be the MVP of those games. But every other matchup that I'd have there, he doesn't do that, because he ends up taking away from kills that will help me by having them killed by a different unit. So I came to the brilliant conclusion that I wanted to create a list that did not have Abaddon in it. And with not having Abaddon in it, I knew that I was going to have 300 points to work with, but I needed to make up for the killing power. But not necessarily in the exact same way. Like, Abaddon is just like a big beat stick in and of himself that just can slaughter things left and right, and he's really good at that. But with 300 points, you can add in a lot of extra threats that make your opponent have to pick and choose what they focus down as my entire army is just pushing up across the board. And with that in mind, I came up with some other ideas. So my list that I was running at the RTT will seem very familiar to a lot of people who have seen my other lists, with a few subtle changes, or not so subtle changes, actually. So to start off, it was just a battalion. So I don't have the Supreme Command Section, obviously, because I don't have Abaddon. But I had the same 3 HQs that I had previously. So I had a Master of Possessions, who was Tzeentch with the Eye of Tzeentch, giving him +1 to cast, auto passing on 9s, Mainly having the Tzeentch in there so that I could use the stratagem to allow him to do a power and a psychic secondary in case I run up into someone that I have no real option against that with. As why I have it there is just like a backup, is like a ace up my sleeve that if I need to do a psychic secondary, I can with him and still do his powers for 1 CP, which at that point makes it worth it because I'm doing things like, Pact of Flesh where I'm bringing back a model and stuff like that. So I have him. I then have a Dark Apostle whose literal only job is to do Illusory Supplication and make one of my units make one of my units trans hitmen, so you can only hit on 4 pluses and can't do rerolls against them. And it's super effective, very good power. That's what he's there for. He makes a big difference. He usually makes a big impact on the game just by putting that power down there and sticking around and doing whatever he's doing. That's what he does. That's all he does. He doesn't have any other buffs. He doesn't have any other relics. Doesn't have anything like that. That's what he does. He sits there and he does that. So then we move on to the third HQ, which is my Beat Stick HQ. I go with the Lord Discordant on, Hellstalker. He has the Bale Flamer because I really like the +2 for flaming weapons for Chaos Space Marines. He also has a Warlord trait called Flames of Spite, which allow wounds of 6 on a dice for a wounds of 6 on the roll. Do 1 mortal wound in addition to the damage of what they do. And that works for both the shooting and close combat. But while in close combat, he can reroll his wound rolls while in melee. So he's pumping out some mortal wounds from that. Then you put on top of that, I also gave him a demon weapon. I gave him Ulok the Black, which is the unaligned demon weapon. And essentially his main chain glaive will be doing mortal wounds on any wounds and in addition to the damage there. So on his main weapon there, he's hitting on 2s, wounding on whatever he is. I think he gets up to strength 7 or 8 or something like that. So he's wounding pretty easily and getting to reroll it because of his Warlord trait. He's doing mortal wounds on wounds that are not 6s, and on 6s he's doing 2 mortal wounds on that weapon. And then he's got like 8 other attacks that can also reroll the wound that are doing wounds on 6 pluses. He puts out a lot of damage, and he does a lot of killing. He's very, very good at that. He's also very fast. He's got a move of 13 with Creations of Bile. Let him get up the table where he needs to and doing super damage. Is really, really good. I really, really like him. I like him in the list. He does a lot of work and usually makes back his points if things don't go horribly wrong. So those are my HQs. I really like all of them. They do a lot of really good work, and it's just, strong contenders in there for the list. I think with the Chaos Space Marines, their HQ list is just unbelievable. They've got so many different options for HQs that are all really good, and it becomes a hard time trying to figure out which ones you want in your list with the spaces that you have available. Then we go into the troop choices where some things have changed. I still had the two cultist mob squads that were just basically there to sit on objectives, get me points back in my end, which is fine for 50 points. They do a great job at that. Sit there and just get me points. That's what they do. That's what they're there for. I then have 2 legionary squads. The first one is a bare bones 5-man squad with bolters. Essentially, they can also sit back in the back there, a little bit tankier than the cultists. Or they can run around with the Master of Possessions getting stabbed with his knife if he needs a +2 to his cast, which is pretty good. So that's what they're there for. I then had, this is one of the big changes that I was able to put in because of removing Abaddon. I had a 10-man legionary squad with chainswords and bolt pistols, and I gave them the Mark of Khorne, and I gave them the Icon of Khorne, which means that they would now have AP2 chainswords. They would have 41 attacks with them. They would end up being strength 6 with Khorne on the first round of combat there. That's a ton of attacks, pretty strong. That would just be able to really remove a lot of smaller units. The big beefy units that are out there that I'd be charging in, I already have with my Chosen and the Terminators that are going in there. They've got a little bit of an extra oomph there, but that's fine. These guys can go after different targets than that. They're also a big chunky, objective secured unit of 10 Marines, which is hard to chew through sometimes. So unless you've got the ability to chew through it, they can be a real hassle. So that was fun to have them in there. That was one of the tools that I thought might be able to work. It's more of a tactical decision. There's still a lot of attacks, still doing what Creations of Bile do, which is charge up and punch things in the face to get me points. But again, having OBSEC gives them a little bit more of a tactical thought that you can work there. They take up a bigger footprint than Abaddon. All those different things that you could use them for screening, for taking objectives, punching in the face. That's what they do. So I thought they were a good option there. I then go into into my elites, which haven't changed much. The only thing that I changed, so I did have a 10-man squad of Chosen with the, the cursed weapons and bolters, and then 2 guys with 2 accursed weapons. They had the Mark of Khorne as well, and they had the Icon of Khorne, so they've got AP -4 on their weapons. They're looking at Strength 7 the first round of combat. They can be buffed up to Strength 8 if I put the mutated Invigoration from the Master of Possessions onto them. A lot of utility from them. I'm a very big fan of them. They've got a base move of 7, can advance and charge for 1 CP with Creations of Bile. They make them a big threat. Hard to ignore them. They're good. They're really good. I really like having them there in conjunction with my other big squad, which is the 10-man squad of the Terminators, which, again, I've got 2 heavy flamers in there. I've got the accursed weapons and the combi bolters. And then on top of it, I also have the... I also made them Mark of Khorne as well. So now they can't take icons with the Terminators, which is why I like the AP4 from the Chosen with the icon. And Terminators can't get the icon, so they're AP3, which is like only AP3, which is, hard sometimes into armies that have Armor of Contempt because it makes it down to AP1, but everyone else, AP3 is usually very, very good. So I have them there. I also gave them the Black Rune of Damnation, making them -1 to the wound rolls against them, which is pretty good. So they are my chunky boys that move up. They're usually the ones that are getting the Illusory Supplication on them, and they just become very, very difficult to remove. And when they do get removed, I can bring back a guy with Pact of Flesh, and it becomes like a big slog, and people usually try to do something about them because they see them coming up the board and they see how dangerous they can be, but they quickly realize it's tough to slog through them unless you really focus on them. And if you're really focusing on them, then I've got a whole lot of other threats that are running around. So I got that Terminator squad there. Then I had 2 5-man possessed squads like I had previously, just doing possessed things, which is great. They're really fast. They've got a ton of attacks. They get up to Strength 7, I think, or 6, Strength 6 or 7, something like that. But it's still super strong. Really good to have them do what they need to do. So that's the possessed there. Then we went into the fast attacks where I still had my 5-man Raptor squad, which I'd really like to have them because they're fast. They can deep strike. They've got a lot of utility and tactical usage that I can get out of them. I really like taking behind enemy lines as a secondary because they can deep strike back there and start getting me points. And by that point, the possessed have also made their way up there, and I can usually get 2 units back there for a couple turns and get a couple rounds of 4 points from that, and it gets me my points for my secondaries, which is great. I then had 2 Venom Crawlers, so I added an additional Venom Crawler into my list by dropping Abaddon. So basically, I could add on a second Venom Crawler, and that 10-man squad of Legionaries with dropping Abaddon there. So it felt like I had. They're really good. They've got some good shooting. They're healing back a wound each turn. They've got really strong close combat. A lot of different things that you can utilize with them. They can be a real pain in the butt. They give me the big booty spider gives me the +1 to the Master Possessions when they're around there, or you can run up and punch things, getting buffed by the Disco Lord as they go up there. So they can be really effective, and I really like them in that list as well. So that was my list, and I went into the tournament thinking this will be a good test because I wanted to see how they do against most armies. There's not a strong knight presence usually in the meta here locally, so it was fun to be able to see that without a whole lot of knights. I wanted to try them because I know knights would be would be a hard matchup for me with this list, losing Abaddon like that, because Abaddon previously had been the savior with a lot of my matchups with the knights. So we went into the tournament, and first round I get Tau. Real shooty. I had to be really tactical. I held back a lot more than I usually do just because I didn't want to just run full on into his shooting and just get myself wiped off the board. But I ended up having a lot of trouble. I held back, couldn't quite get where I needed to with some advanced rolls that didn't go the way I needed them to, and then I failed some charge rolls. He was making me -2 to my charges against the suits and into breachers. Or strike teams or something like that. I can't remember which one it was. But super fun opponent. Really had a great time. It was really close. But then once my guys did get into... he wiped my Chosen. They failed his charge. We're out in the open, and he had a kill squad of crisis suits that just murderlated them entirely. But my Terminators got into it. My Big Booty Spiders got into it. A lot of those guys got into combat. My Disco Lord did a lot of work getting into combat. And I just ended up being able to kill enough of him and keep him from getting the points that he needed while getting the points that I needed. And I managed the victory against the town. It was fun because I knew that my list also suffers against really strong gun lines because I have to charge across the board in order to get into it. So it felt good to know that I could maneuver my guys, and I kept him hidden. I kept a lot of line of sight away from him from his big shooty units, which made it harder for him to get it. Like I said, the main ones where he really got like a lot of effect with his shooting was once I like flubbed a charge roll or something like that. But otherwise, they got their charges in when I eventually got them in there, and then once they were in combat, it became what I wanted with my army because they could just start punching and kicking and killing his guys, which was pretty great. So I got the victory against Tau round 1. Round 2, Chaos Knights, of course. I went into it thinking I was not going to have to worry about Knights, that this was going to be a test without having to worry about Knights. And sure enough, there we go. To round 2, I'm going up against Knights. But he was running a lot of the War Dogs. So it was a lot of War Dogs, no big guys, just all War Dogs. And there was just a bunch of them. He had some shooting ones, he had some close combat ones, and he went first. So he kind of had to move up the board, get into position to get his points, try to get into line of sight for his shooting because I was hiding behind cover and everything like that. And then round 1, turn 1, I was able to get up and make a bunch of charges. And once I got in the thick of his guys and was able to move from like knight to knight, I was just slaughtering, 2 or 3 War Dogs per turn once I got involved with killing things there, and I was able to just kill him off the table. So ton of fun, really great opponent, really had a good time. But I mean, just like the overwhelming number of attacks that I could get there at strength 7, so I'm wounding his armorgers the War Dogs, on 4s, and he's not getting invulns. I've got AP 3 and AP 4 on my Chosen and my Terminators. AP 2 even on the Possessed is enough for a lot of that. So it's just, putting him in, he just can't make enough rolls for it. So it became, it felt good to go against Knights with this list, knowing that Knights was one of the hard counters that I thought I was going to be facing. And for it to be able to perform against Knights felt good. It meant that I'm not completely out in the, on the wilds with this list, that I'm trying to piece together and figure out what happens here. So they were able to go up and do their thing and managed to beat the Knights. So that was cool. That left me at the top of the heap because I had 2 really strong showings for points. So I was at the top there and get paired up against Tyranids and up against Leviathan here. He had 2 of the Harpies, the Flyers. He had 2 squads of 3 Zoanthropes. He had a Neurothrope. He had a Hive Tyrant with the special gun. He had a Tyrannifex with the big gun. He had 2 Carnifexes with their guns. He had some warriors, and it was a lot of big monster mash that he was going to have there, that he was going to be able to come up and just do a lot of damage with. And the smites were just going to be trouble. Psychic was going to be a very big trouble. And I knew it, but I also knew what my target priority needed to be for that. So, seeing what the target priority was going to be, I tried. Turn 1, he goes first. He manages to come up with his Psychers, gets them into position, kills 5 of my Chosen. Managed to kill 5 of my Chosen. I failed the leadership test, and another one runs, so that left me with 3 Chosen left there on the bottom of turn 1 there. He managed to kill one of my Possessed. He killed a bunch of things with getting into position. And he had kind of come up. He hadn't even gotten to the halfway mark of the board. He just kind of moved up and got into a position to try to get all those powers off because he knew he needed to hit me fast before I could get involved with him, which is fair, which is what was going to happen. So my turn 1 comes up, and I managed to stick some really crucial charges, and I managed to get 1 Possessed squad into one of his Zoanthrope squads. I got my Disco Lord, trying to send him on a suicide mission up the board, charged into the Neurothrope, and managed to get another Possessed squad into his other Zoanthrope squad because I managed to Pact of Flesh that unit because they had killed the one and put him closer towards him. So I was like 2 inches plus a base closer to him for the charge, where they had run up, where they had managed to go up with their movement of 10, which is still pretty far, but then the addition of that made a big difference. Managed to stick all those charges and killed almost all of his Psychers there. I think there was 1 Zoanthrope left that he had to spend like 2 CP or something, or 2 different ways to spend CP to try to keep him alive, so that he had at least him alive. But he was then stuck in combat with me. I did kill the Neurothrope, and he charged into my guy on his turn, charged into my Disco Lord with his Hive Tyrant, who he then killed the Disco Lord, but the Disco Lord, fighting on death, managed to kill his Hive Tyrant too. So suddenly now, and I killed the last of the Zoanthrope, so his top of turn 2, he now had 0 Psychers, and he had taken a Psychic Secondary, which meant he was not going to get any more secondary points from that. And now all of my stuff was now up in his face, and there was not much I could do against the Flyers. They just flew around, dropped bombs, shot me with all their guns. They're really, really powerful, and they just did a number on me. But I had enough, and I was able to survive enough and bring enough guys back that I was able to get primary points and like skunk him on primary points. Got my primary points, got my secondary points, and managed to pull off a pretty sizable victory, which was pretty fun. But again, fantastic opponent. All 3 opponents were incredible people. Had a lot of fun, and we had a really good time. But it was fun to see the list perform there, and I won the tournament, which was great. Came in first, 3-0, with a lot of points, which meant that my list was doing what it had to do to get me the points, which means it's doing what I needed to do in a game. So it was fun to be able to play a list that was Creations of Bile. It was Chaos Space Marines without Abaddon. Which was a ton of fun to be able to see how it worked. A lot of the ideas that I had came to fruition, which was great. I think the second Venom Crawler was definitely better than the 10-man Legionary Squad. The 10-man Legionary Squad didn't quite do what I had hoped it to do. You know, on paper I had visions of them running up the board, but they kind of had they couldn't be the front, the spear tip, and because of that, they didn't really get into combat very much. And then they would just get shut up, and it was just, they weren't quite doing what I needed them to. And that's 200 points there that I think is probably going to get dropped. I have ideas for how to improve the list without Abaddon, which is kind of fun. It's going to leave me with like 0 CP, but I think it's going to be a good time. So I think in my future endeavors with it, I'm going to drop the 200-man squad, the 200-point 10-man squad. I'm going to drop drop the second Venom Crawler. And then I'm going to drop the Eye of Tzeentch. Even though it's nice to have that +1 and the 9 can't be denied, I'm going to drop it because my plan is to take another patrol detachment, which will leave me with 0 CP because I'm going to give a relic to a Flying Demon Prince as the HQ, and then just a 5-man squad of regular legionaries to give me my points for, I guess, 2,000 points there. But basically, I'm just bringing in the Flying Demon Prince. He's going to be Mark of Nurgle, so that I can take the Nurgle demon weapon, which is going to allow him to go through, it ignores Feel No Pains, it ignores the phase lock stuff, so he's kind of in there to be my anti-Abaddon, the anti-Catan Shards, the anti- Gazgul, the bloodthirsters and stuff like that. So I think he's going to be powerful. He's going to be fast. He's a psyker, making him Nurgle, so he can even do some of the psychic powers. So I'm still going to leave the Master of Possessions with the Mark of Tzeentch. I'm just going to change it so that I also have him as a backup in case I want him to do psychic secondaries, and just have him just do his 2 powers there, which is pretty good. Having 2 psychers makes taking a psychic secondary a far less of a scary endeavor there, especially when they're characters and they can be blocked and hidden, which is fun. But yeah, it felt fun to be able to go in there without Abaddon and still do well with the Creations of Bile. They just fit so well with my playstyle, which is super, super aggressive no matter what army I'm playing. So being able to go in there, be aggressive, be effective without Abaddon felt good, because there's so many games where Abaddon was just so far back, not doing anything, and he was just a scary presence on the board, but not doing me anything, not getting me points, not winning me games. And it's like 300 points doing that is tough to take, because if you have 300 points there, what are you doing? That's not really doing you much for the table. It's not doing you stuff. It's not winning you games. And at that point, there's probably something out there that can do better. So we're gonna give it a shot with the Flying Demon Prince, and we're gonna give it a shot again. Maybe some other twists and turns. We got to figure it out. So I've got LVO coming up faster than I would have hoped. That I would imagine, at the end of January there. So it'll be fun to be able to see how they do there in Las Vegas, or Lost Wages, as I like to call it. If anyone gets that reference, let me know down in the comment section. But yeah, so let me know what you think. Are you happy to see Chaos Space Marines not being led by Abaddon? You know, it's not, he can't leave every force, right? He can't leave every force of his 13th Black Crusade. He's got to leave somebody to go run some other errands off in other other battlefields over there. So I think it was fun to be able to see that. It's fun to have a Chaos Space Marine force that doesn't just depend on Abaddon. So I like him. I think he's fun. I mean, there's part of me that's got this itch to try to maybe do a Black Legion list with him, which would make more sense, but we'll see what happens. I think I'm going to keep going with this, the non-Abaddon Creations of Bile, just to see where I can go with that. But let me know down below what you think about it. You know, share, like, and subscribe. As always, it helps immensely. And I'm really thankful for all of you guys here on the channel that watch my videos and share them and send them out there, because it makes a big difference. So I really appreciate it. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.